In the village, strange things started happening after the woman asked, "Do you know what kind of meat this is?" People whispered about her, but no one dared to confront her directly. Some villagers noticed that her children hadn't been seen in days, and others mentioned hearing strange cries late at night coming from her house. But fear kept them silent. One day, Kofi, the woman's youngest child, was nowhere to be found. His friends had seen him playing by the river the day before, but since then, it was like he had vanished into thin air. His sister, Amma, asked around the village, but no one had any answers. The worry in her heart grew heavier each day, as their mother seemed strangely calm, her eyes distant, as if hiding a terrible secret. Amma's stomach tightened every time her mother called her to dinner, especially when the scent of meat filled the air. That evening, as Amma sat at the table, her mother served her a bowl of stew, the steam rising from it in thick clouds. She hesitated, staring at the dark chunks floating in the broth. "Eat up, Amma. It's your favorite," her mother said, her voice soft but chilling. Amma's hands trembled as she lifted the spoon. Her mother watched her with that same unnerving smile, the one that never reached her eyes. Amma put the spoon back down, unable to swallow. Her mother's smile grew wider, her eyes glinting in the flickering light of the fire. The next day, Amma couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling gnawing at her. She decided to find Kofi herself, sneaking out early in the morning while her mother was still asleep. She searched the village, asking everyone she could. The baker, the blacksmith, even the elders. No one had seen her brother. Finally, Amma found herself near the edge of the forest, the one place her mother had warned her never to go. There, hidden behind the thick trees, she found something horrifying. Kofi's small shoes, half buried in the dirt. Her heart raced, her hands shaking as she reached down to pick them up. How did they end up here? As Amma knelt in the dirt, she heard a twig snap behind her. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. Her mother stood there, her face unreadable. "What are you doing out here, Amma?" she asked, her voice cold. Amma clutched Kofi's shoes to her chest, unable to speak. Her mother's eyes flickered with something dark and dangerous. "Come home, Amma. You'll catch a cold out here," she said, her voice sounding like a command. Amma didn't dare disobey, but something inside her told her she was in danger. Back at home, Amma couldn't shake the feeling that her mother was hiding something terrible. That night, as her mother slept, Amma crept down the hallway. There was a door in their house that was always locked, a room her mother never spoke of. Amma had always wondered what was inside, but now, with Kofi gone and her mother acting so strange, she was determined to find out. She tiptoed to the door, her heart thudding in her chest. She tried the handle, locked, as usual. Amma had seen her mother hide the key once in the kitchen, tucked behind a shelf. With trembling hands, she found the key and returned to the door. The key slid into the lock with a soft click. Slowly she pushed the door open, the hinges creaking loudly in the silence of the house. Inside, the room was dark, the only light coming from the moon through a small window. What Amma saw next made her blood run cold. There, in the middle of the room, was a large pot, like the one her mother always used for cooking, and beside it, a pile of bones. Amma's breath caught in her throat. The bones, were they... No, it couldn't be. She staggered back, her heart pounding wildly. But as she looked closer, she saw something that made her stomach twist in horror. One of the bones was wrapped in a familiar piece of cloth, Kofi's favorite shirt. Tears welled up in Amma's eyes. Could it be? Could her mother really have done something so horrible? She thought back to the nights when her mother would serve stew with a strange smile. The time she'd asked, "Do you know what kind of meat this is?" Amma's hands shook as she backed out of the room, her mind spinning with the terrible truth she had just uncovered. She knew she couldn't stay in the house anymore. Not with her mother, not after what she had seen. She had to escape. She had to get help. But as she turned to run, she heard footsteps behind her. "Amma!" Her mother's voice came from the shadows. Amma froze. Slowly she turned to see her mother standing in the doorway, her eyes cold and empty, her hands gripping a large knife. Amma's heart raced as her mother stepped toward her, the knife glinting in the dim light. "I told you never to open that door," her mother said, her voice low and dangerous. Amma's eyes darted to the window. It was her only way out. Without thinking, she bolted for it, leaping through the glass just as her mother lunged at her. The sound of shattering glass filled the air as Amma tumbled to the ground outside, her arms and legs scraped from the fall. She scrambled to her feet and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop running until she reached the edge of the village, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, the house stood dark and silent, but Amma knew her mother would be coming for her. She had to find help, had to warn the village. But who would believe her? As she looked up at the night sky, tears streaming down her face, she knew one thing for certain. Her mother wasn't who she thought she was. And if Amma didn't stop her, the village would never be safe again. She didn't know where to go, but she knew she couldn't go home. Her mother had turned into something else, something dark and evil. As she stumbled into the village, Amma saw the elder's house at the edge of the market. She raced toward it, her breaths coming in gasps. When she burst through the door, the elder, a wise and kind woman named Nana, looked up in shock. "Amma, what is wrong, child?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. Amma tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. All she could do was point toward her house, her hands trembling. "My mother, she's not what you think," Amma finally managed to say, tears spilling down her cheeks. Nana's face darkened. She had known Amma's mother for years, ever since she was a child herself. But there was something in Amma's eyes that made her listen closely. "Sit down, Amma," Nana said, her voice now grave. "There's something I need to tell you." Nana's expression grew more serious as she began to speak. "Long ago, before you were born, there was a woman in this village who made a terrible deal with dark spirits. In exchange for wealth and power, she was cursed to feed those spirits with the flesh of her own children. Many believed that the curse had died with that woman. But now, it seems the darkness has returned." Amma's blood ran cold as she realized the horrifying truth. Her mother was the one who had inherited the curse. As the weight of Nana's words settled in, Amma felt a mix of fear and determination building inside her. She couldn't let the curse continue. She had to stop her mother before anyone else was hurt. "But how do I stop her?" Amma asked, her voice small and frightened. Nana took a deep breath and placed a hand on Amma's shoulder. "There is a way," she said, her eyes serious. "You must destroy the source of her power, the pot. Without it, the spirits will no longer have a hold on her." Amma felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly dampened by fear. The pot was in the house, and her mother was still there, watching, waiting. "I can't do it alone," Amma whispered. Nana nodded. "You won't have to," she said. "I will gather the village. We will help you." Together, they hatched a plan to sneak into the house and destroy the pot once and for all. But time was running out. Amma knew her mother would soon realize she was gone, and when she did, there would be no mercy. That night, as the village slept, Nana and a group of villagers gathered at the edge of the forest, ready to face the evil that lurked in Amma's home. Amma stood at the front, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She had never been so scared in her life, but she knew she had to be brave. The lives of the village, and her own, depended on it. As they crept toward the house, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it a sense of dread. The house stood dark and silent, but Amma knew her mother was inside, waiting for her. Nana handed Amma a torch, its flame flickering in the cool night air. "You must be the one to do it," Nana said. "The spirits will only release her if her own blood breaks the curse." Amma swallowed hard, nodding. Slowly, they approached the house, the door creaking open as they stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of cooked meat, and Amma's stomach turned as she thought about what might be simmering in the pot. But she had no time to be afraid. She had to act fast. As they entered the kitchen, there it was, the cursed pot, sitting on the stove, bubbling with dark magic. Amma could feel its evil energy pulsing in the air, and her knees felt weak. But before she could reach it, the door slammed shut behind her. Amma spun around, and there stood her mother, her eyes cold and full of anger. "You thought you could stop me, didn't you?" her mother hissed, stepping forward with the knife still in her hand. The villagers gasped and stepped back, but Amma held her ground. "I know what you've done," Amma said, her voice shaking but strong, "and I'm going to stop you." Her mother's face twisted with rage, her eyes glowing with the power of the spirits. "You are my daughter. You are part of this curse," she shouted. "There is no escape." But Amma knew better. She gripped the torch tightly and stepped toward the pot. "No more," Amma whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. In one swift motion, she threw the torch into the pot. Flames erupted, and the air filled with the terrible wail of the spirits as they were finally released from their prison. The house shook violently as the cursed pot was consumed by flames, its dark magic unraveling in a whirl of smoke and ash. Amma's mother let out a scream, dropping the knife and collapsing to the floor. Amma rushed to her side, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, please," Amma whispered, holding her mother's hand. For a moment, her mother's eyes cleared, the darkness fading from them. "Amma," she whispered weakly, "I'm sorry." And then, just like that, her mother's body went limp, the last trace of the curse finally gone. Amma felt a deep sadness wash over her, but at the same time, a sense of relief. The curse was broken, and the village was safe. Nana and the villagers gathered around her, their faces filled with sorrow and gratitude. "You did it, Amma," Nana said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The curse is over." But as Amma looked around the house, a shadow of doubt crept into her mind. The spirits were gone. The pot was destroyed, but something still didn't feel right. Deep down, Amma knew that the darkness might not be completely gone. There was something else, something waiting, watching. The night was quiet, too quiet, and that's when she heard it. A faint whisper, drifting on the wind. "It's not over." Amma froze at the sound of the whisper, her heart pounding once again. The villagers had begun to leave the house, thinking the nightmare was over. But Amma couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air was still, but the faint whisper returned, sending a chill down her spine. She looked to Nana, who had also heard it. "Did you hear that?" Amma asked, her voice trembling. Nana's eyes darkened as she nodded slowly. "We need to leave this place," she said quietly. "Now." But before they could move, the whisper grew louder, echoing through the house like a soft, sinister chant. "It's not over. It's never over." Amma looked around in panic. The pot was destroyed. Her mother was gone. How could the curse still linger? Nana's face grew pale, her hand gripping Amma's arm. "There is something deeper," she whispered. "Something older than the curse itself." Nana led Amma outside, away from the house, but the whisper followed them. It was then that Nana revealed a terrifying truth. The curse wasn't just about the pot or the spirits that had haunted Amma's mother. Long before, there had been a powerful spirit in the village, a forgotten entity that demanded more than just offerings. It demanded loyalty, obedience, and blood. "Your mother was only the beginning," Nana said, her voice shaking. "The spirit wanted more. It always wants more." As they walked further from the house, Amma began to see strange figures in the shadows. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But when one of the villagers screamed, she knew it was real. Out of the darkness, twisted shapes emerged, shadows of children with hollow eyes and mouths twisted in silent cries. Amma recognized them. They were the souls of the children who had been sacrificed long ago. They moved towards her, their bony fingers reaching out. Amma's heart raced as she backed away, but Nana stood her ground. "These are the lost ones," she said, her voice firm. "They are trapped between worlds, waiting for the spirit to claim them." Amma watched in horror as the shadows circled around her. They didn't attack, but their presence was suffocating, their cold fingers grazing her skin as they moved past. "What do they want?" Amma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nana looked at her with sorrow in her eyes. "They want what they were promised, a place in the world of the living. The spirit controls them, and now it wants you, Amma." Before Amma could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep, rumbling sound filled the air, and the earth cracked open. From the depths of the darkness below, a figure began to rise, a monstrous, towering being with glowing eyes and a mouth filled with sharp, jagged teeth. It was the spirit, the one that had controlled her mother, the one that had demanded the sacrifices. Its voice boomed, shaking the ground beneath their feet. "You cannot escape me," it hissed, its eyes locking onto Amma. "You are part of the curse." Amma felt her legs buckle beneath her. She had destroyed the pot, broken her mother's curse. But this was something far worse. The spirit's power was beyond anything she had imagined. "What do I do?" Amma asked, her voice trembling. Nana looked at her sadly. "You must offer yourself, Amma. It is the only way to save the village. The spirit demands a sacrifice, and it has chosen you." Amma's heart dropped. She couldn't believe what Nana was saying. How could she sacrifice herself? She had just fought so hard to free her mother from the curse, only to find out that it was now her turn to be taken. "There has to be another way," Amma pleaded. But Nana shook her head. "The spirit's hunger is endless, Amma. It has claimed your family for generations. You must be the one to end it." Tears streamed down Amma's face as she looked up at the spirit, its massive form towering over her, its eyes glowing with malice. She could feel its power pulling her toward it, like a black hole drawing her in. She didn't want to die, but she couldn't let the village suffer because of her family's curse. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her hands trembling. "If my life is the price to save the village, then I will pay it," she whispered. As Amma approached the spirit, the shadows of the children closed in around her. They reached out to touch her, their cold fingers brushing against her skin. But as they did, something incredible happened. The spirit began to shrink, its form weakening with each step Amma took. The power it had over the children was breaking, and soon the spirit was no more than a shadow itself. With a final bone-chilling scream, it disappeared into the ground, leaving only silence behind. The village was saved, the spirit defeated, but Amma could feel the weight of what had happened pressing down on her. She had survived, but at what cost? She had lost her mother, her brother, and her innocence. The villagers thanked her for her bravery, but deep down, Amma knew that the darkness would never truly be gone. The curse might have ended with her sacrifice, but the scars it left would remain forever. As she stood on the edge of the village, looking out over the land that had been her home, Amma realized a terrible truth. Some curses could never be broken. They only passed from one generation to the next, like a shadow that followed you wherever you went. The spirit had been defeated, but the darkness it had created would never be forgotten. The village would rebuild, the children would laugh again, but the memory of the sacrifices would haunt them all. And that was the lesson. Sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, the darkness leaves a mark that can never be erased. Evil can be hidden, defeated, but never truly destroyed. It always waits, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to return.